If you were to write a theory of everything, where would you start? Maybe with the fundamental particles which make up atoms, or the Big Bang in the primordial soup. But for one man with a recorded IQ of around 200, a theory of everything starts with the mind. More specifically, language, actually. Not human language, but the language by which reality, in his words, communicates to itself about itself. The alleged proof of God and the whole in-depth exploration of this theory is outlined on a 56-page paper regarding the fundamental nature of logic, the universe, and something called infocognitive monism, whatever that means, which is all pretty impressive given its author, Chris Langan, did this all while working as a bouncer at a bar in Long Island. Okay, so the CTMU, or Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe, is a model which uses a logical basis to describe what reality is and how it operates throughout ourselves and our universe. I actually did already make a video about the CTMU which focuses more on its principles and underlying philosophy, which I'll leave a link to, but this video will focus more on what religion means within this context and how exactly God is proven through this work. But before we get really into that, I should definitely outline the basics of this theory so we can have some groundwork to understand God and religion in this context. The CTMU describes reality as a self-contained form of language. This means that when something physically or otherwise affects something else, there is a transfer of information, which is also called syntax. In order for this syntax to be interpreted on a consistent basis, there must be a logical relation which underlies the whole interaction. This is essentially what math and physics describes, a series of logical relations between different states and types of interactions. So, language in this context does not just mean the spoken word, it fundamentally means symbols or information which is related and communicated on some consistent logical basis. Given that all languages, religions, and science itself use logic to describe and communicate reality, and logic is a fundamental ingredient of reality, the CTMU attempts to cut out the middleman. It suggests that a complete formulation of logic itself could contain all of these seemingly different systems of communication and describe reality as a whole. So the CTMU could also be called the Logos, a formulation of the relationship between logic and reality, and an explanation of why logic is a valid way of understanding reality in the first place. Part of why this relationship is valid and consistent is because reality is self-dual, meaning reality is one unified entity which contains both physical and mental aspects which play off each other for existence. This differs from Cartesian duality, which states that the mental and physical are separate, allowing the mental to be seen as secondhand or illusory. But the CTMU instead necessitates an underlying consistency and unity between all things mental and physical. So essentially, within all physical entities, including particles, there is an underlying sort of mental force, which uses logic or language to interpret the surrounding syntax and then, according to the entity's telos or purpose, then reacts and affects the state of its surrounding environment. So to summarize, the CTMU basically says, all that is mind, or as above, so below. With that basic description out of the way, we can move on to what God means within the CTMU. As previously stated, both physical and mental reality are contained within one unified ultimate reality, and the identity of this ultimate reality is God. Langan argues that God exists outside of the realm of cause and effect, and that during creation, God created time and therefore causality and uses it to identify itself, which is the ultimate purpose of all existence. Therefore, God, in wanting to identify himself, contains a property called unbound telesis, meaning unconstrained, undifferentiated, and complete boundless potential and experience of reality. This is described within traditional theology as omniscience, and within Buddhism is called sunyata, which is the voidness that constitutes ultimate reality. Not empty, but without any definite attribute, just pure syntax. I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense as far as the nature of God goes, but how exactly does the CTMU prove any of this? This proof starts by looking at all processes within reality as threefold. Everything which exists has a physical objectivity, an operator which perceives and models it, and a logical underpinning to comprehend it. So reality itself, since it does exist, is made up of a triality as well. Therefore, the physical universe or reality is the object. Mathematics and language, namely logic itself, is the consistent relational basis for it, and that which perceives reality and therefore is the identity of reality itself is God. So essentially, for reality and the physical universe to exist under any consistent logical basis, as we know it does, it therefore must have a unified identity, which is God. Or in the words of Chris Langan himself, so the CTMU is essentially a theory of the relationship between mind and reality. In explaining this relationship, the CTMU shows that reality possesses a complex property akin to self-awareness. That is, just as the mind is real, reality is in some respects like a mind. But when we attempt to answer the obvious question, whose mind, the answer turns out to be a mathematical and scientific definition of God. This implies that we all exist in what can be called the mind of God. So if the entire universe is inside the mind of God, and according to religion, humans are made in the image of God, then what role do we play in this process? Langan tells us that man, like God, craves knowledge of his own identity, an identity which, as we now know, is shared with ultimate reality or God himself. Spirituality and religion therefore serve as a reminder that our identity in existence is unified in part of a more fundamental reality. If you think about religion specifically, it is made of forms of symbols and relations between them on some consistent basis. This makes religion awfully similar to a language which is a higher level entity, beyond any one person, which is able to interpret something. This something is a transcendent cosmic syntax, which is translated to the realm of the human individual, allowing religious followers to embody a more truthful mode of being. So seemingly different interpretations of religions are not wrong or contradictory, but rather are reflections of the meaning which humans assign to the same cosmic syntax. I mean, think about it. To look at a religious text or any form of information and assign it with any meaning, you must interpret the symbols in some subjective or personal way. Therefore, meaning necessitates different interpretations. So, where the CTMU comes in regards to religion is that it claims to offer a higher metaphysical logic to understand all of these other religions or languages within that context. So it claims to compose a language based entirely on logic itself, which therefore applies not just to differing interpretations which all use logic, but rather to the whole of reality itself, as reality operates on a logical basis. The catch is, the CTMU can only be said to apply to religions and interpretations which are, and I quote, valid in their core structure. A valid interpretation is one which is conducive towards maximizing the generalized utility of the universe. Generalized utility is a CTMU term which basically describes how well something fits into the ordering, purpose-making, self-defining, and overall coherence of the universe. So the purpose of human existence is to self-actualize in a way consistent with the global self-actualization, maximizing the utility of the many unified systems in the universe, which helps the universe express its nature in a self-beneficial way. In human terms, this is generally synonymous with a utilitarian perspective, aka the most good for the largest number of people without infringing on anyone's rights. But it goes a little deeper by acknowledging the role humanity must play in a larger cosmic narrative where the ultimate purpose is self-experience. So a religion or ideology that makes people destructive towards one another and diminishes the experience of human unity and reflection with the divine is not valid. We can evaluate religious figures and even absolute moral convictions under this perspective, but I'll clue you into the fact that most all religions are considered generally valid by this theory's author, but not all are equal. A figure like Christ still stands out as an exemplar of virtue, wisdom, and human sacrifice. So obviously, if everyone were to act like Jesus, we'd be much better off. But certain other religious figures, well, not so much. So a strong and consistent model and connection to the divine is necessary for human flourishing and the advancement of generalized utility. But according to Chris Langan, humanity is actually approaching a very dangerous fork in the road, where one of two things could happen. 1. Technological singularity. Humans will accept the false idea of Cartesian physical and mental duality, leading us to think of ourselves as biological machines, where any connection to the divine is a mental illusion. This leads us to focus our efforts in physical technological growth, therefore ushering in the advent of technology made to replace or change humans, which will be controlled by elites for their own purposes. Or 2. Human singularity. By realizing the true identity of ourselves in relation to God and ultimate reality, humans will recognize the unified nature of our physical and mental existence. In doing so, humans across different religions and ideologies will become unified through a common purpose, which is the deepening of experience and self-benefit throughout the whole universe. You can tell which of the two scenarios sounds better. And with the coming of AI, the decline of religion, and much more, it's not hard to see that we may be on the verge of something like this. So with all of this crazy stuff going on in our world today, it's good to have a proper foundation of wisdom to navigate it. So please consider subscribing to my channel, where we explore many interesting, meaningful, and important topics within philosophy, science, religion, and much more. Thanks for watching this video. Please like and comment, and as always, never stop questioning, talking, and thinking. Thank you.